trusted associate at close of play, revenant, creator. And what do we ask of it? On, off, rise, set. A boundless force, far from binary. Limited words talk of limitless potential. These expanses we occupy, these spaces we construct and anoint our homes are built and composed just to contain it. This intangible blueprint that runs through all things. We gather round it, communicate through it. So what stuff is this that warms us to the core? We have bottled the storm and let it rumble, conquered the lightning and cradled its heat in our hands. Awe has turned to control. The infinite possibilities of the world outside exist within our grasp. Your space, your creation, it starts here. Light starts here.
Morning, guys. Hopefully you can hear me. We got Shelley? Hey, Shelley. I think you might be on mute, Shelley. If you just click the old... I think we were talking too much before. There you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Stuff. Morning. So morning, everyone. I hope you're good. The normal daily dose on a Thursday, once a month, of sort of adrenaline-fueled lighting videos. Hopefully it's not old now, and it still sort of gives you the enthusiasm for the chat. And I think if that doesn't, then we've got Dr. Shelley back, which should get the excitement back. So thank you for joining us again, Shelley.
Thanks. Great to be here. Absolutely great to be here.
So yeah, guys, we've got a really interesting subject this time round. I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now, Shelley, haven't we? And I think as a topic area, it's one which I've seen on LinkedIn and stuff. You've been looking into a lot. There's been a lot of research and webinars of your own, I think, that you've been hosting about so the importance of light and learning and just sort of how susceptible we are to light. I mean, we've covered all facets of light in these webinars, and we've had light pollution, color psychology. We had Russell Foster on talking about circadian rhythms. I'm sure he'll pop up a little bit in conversation here, but your knowledge on this subject is absolutely awesome. So really looking forward to getting into it with you. So guys, as ever as well, this is Light Tribe is a sidearm of Phos, and it's supposed to be neutral, and it's supposed to be a place of learning, trading ideas, and being inspired by light, basically reveling in the power of light and what it can do. And it's any questions you have, please do sort of write in the chat. You should be able just to type away, and if you don't have, I'll write the email address now actually, but basically afterwards, if you have any ideas about questions or things you'd like to get involved with, then yeah, drop us a line to this email. So yeah, let's get into it, shall we? I will leave it to you potentially, Shelley, to give a little brief or whatever it is that you'd like to do. But yeah, where do we start? Light and learning.
I guess the most we're learning more and more about how important darkness actually is to learning, because it allows us to sleep. And there are two types of memory. One's called declarative memory, which is kind of facts and figures that you remember. There's something called procedural memory, which your ability to remember stuff, how to do stuff. So motor memory, all those different things. And they are, your body just doesn't store it unless you've had a good night's sleep. And it turns out that even a nap, a 45-minute nap with a bit of REM sleep thrown in there, allows you to makes a massive difference to your ability to remember stuff. And obviously kids are trying to learn all kinds of stuff in this crazy world that we live in. And so the most important thing you can do in terms of lighting for learning is actually to make sure that it's dark so that they get to go to sleep. So perhaps you could just move on to the next slide there. So actually their body clocks are still setting when they're born, and as you will know as a parent and certainly as an aunt and a godmother, I've seen them shift from setting their clocks to it drifting during teenage years and then settling down again. And then with older people that I'm very fond of, I see their clocks shifting again. So but it's really interesting as a general rule to think about where you position your learning in the day, so long as they've had a good night's sleep, where you position their learning in the day to make sure that their bodies and brains are ready to take in that information. So I know, Xander, you've been training for an Ironman, and actually trying to get your body to do something really extreme very early in the morning, like when you've got your sharpest rise in blood pressure, is probably not ideal. It may be for us grown-ups that we feel that we can kind of get the exercise in before the day starts, but actually if you really look at when it's best for you and your kids to be doing learning how to play tennis or whatever it is, or kick a football around, it's sort of just after lunch, early afternoon. So just be really aware of when you learn best. And actually we each have our own learning styles, and kids aren't any different. And over in Los Angeles recently, they've managed to delay the start time of schools for teenagers to 9:30, and they've seen something like a 98% increase in attendance. They've seen a reduction in the number of accidents from bad driving. They've seen a reduction in the amount of substance abuse. I mean, as in coffee and Diet Cokes. They've just seen the most amazing shift in those young people's ability to learn.
I think there was a headmaster in the UK somewhere that
That's right.
this as well. He shifted it to 9:30, and I think the average number of A's at GCSE went up. I can't remember the numbers, but it definitely went up. And learning and tardiness and stuff, everyone was on time to the lessons because they were ready to learn. And I think it's either Russell Foster's book, where as always, guys, as well, we'll send a reading list out, and we've added a new reading list tab to our Light Tribe website, so all of the stuff we ever talk about will be on there for a quick glance as reference. But I think the equivalent of a 16-year-old person waking up and going to a lesson at 9 a.m. Is the equivalent of a 65-year-old person being forced to wake up at 5 a.m. And if you imagine tucking them into to try and learn and stuff, and it's strange, going back to this thing about the Ironman training and stuff, I keep having to kind of squeeze it in the morning, all the sort of runs and swims and stuff. But society just isn't really made up in a way that is conducive to sort of optimal workouts and stuff like that. And doing it in the morning, I mean, it's really, really difficult.
You had to take your bed for several days, didn't you? Anyway, move on from your training exploits. What I'm saying is that really, if we're trying to create an environment where children and young people learn, then we should really be super, super sensitive to when they're best suited to do that, so that they get a great start of feeling like they have confidence that they know how to learn. So let's move on to the next slide. And essentially we know, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, but there's the visual system and the non-visual system, which people like Russell Foster are pioneers in discovering. And essentially the non-visual system, which is a set of different, there's still some work on this, but they are basically, they're not working out what color things are, but they're working out what time it is. And they're sensitive to slow changes in the color temperature, but particularly the brightness. And I'm just going to, if we can move on to the next slide. So essentially, we get a peak sort of mid-morning of the brightness of the day, and traveling down. And that's a sort of a winter sort of UK, and that's Northern Hemisphere thing. But yes, there are actually, Annika, I can take a note to share those with you. Share that with you. There are some interesting ones. Hey, Annika, yeah. If we can, Xander, if you can keep a track of the
yeah, of course, the chat
questions, that's great. So let's move on. So yes, so all kinds of things are shifting during that period, and what we know is, in order to kind of get your body clock setting, get out there early in the morning, not necessarily to do your Ironman training, but to get a good old burst of sunlight early on. And in the past, when kids were walking to school, obviously they were getting that, but it's much harder when they are sort of just falling out of bed and in front of their computer. So if there's any way of using the time that you would have used on the school run to do a run, a walk outside, that's going to make a massive difference. That's going to allow them to set that clock really, really, really solidly, so that they get good night's sleep and then good day's work. So we talk about the visual and the non-visual system. I mean, we're learning more and more. We used to just think it was all that section at the top, which is the visual pathway. We used to think that was pretty much it. I mean, it's already pretty amazing, but all these things that are happening in terms of your immune system, your inflammatory response, and your metabolism of vitamin D. All those things are regulated by that non-visual system, which is receiving light. So natural light is best, but we'll talk a little bit about some other options in a moment. There's a lot of information on there, but just to say that the impact of particularly bright daylight type light early in the day and then stopping that light later on it doesn't get more important to their ability to learn and to kind of feel happy and comfortable, which is another, as we all know, if you're feeling miserable, it's really hard to take anything in. So all those reasons are to make sure that you really take care of the amount of bright light that you get in the morning. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. The other thing, talk about bright light, I suppose the other thing that is really important is the amount of light. So children, when they're born, they're given a sort of a whole set of genetic potentials, and what they're trying to do is to work out which ones they need to use. And if, like plants, they're growing in the dark, and actually in our homes, we're looking at about sort of 1,000th of the light that you're getting outside, even on a cloudy day, then they're growing, or their whole bodies and their brains are going to, and their eyes are actually going to be growing like plants in a dark room. So if we can move on to the next slide. And what that means eventually is like plants, they kind of grow a pointy shape. It's called myopia. You can see that the light traveling through the lens at the front of the eye focuses in front of the fovea, the bit at the back, which is the light, sort of the image forming bit, and the time sensing thing. So that's why you need glasses, is essentially to kind of open up the angle of the way the light's traveling through the front of the eye. So if you have an astigmatism, is the opposite, but actually that's genetic more than you're absolutely right, Simone. So what we're looking at is making sure that they get enough bright light, and actually it's about 2 hours that they need in order. Well, that's currently the accepted wisdom, is that you need about 2 hours of daylight or daylight level brightness in your day to make sure that your eyes and your children's eyes grow the right shape. Okay.
Well, I guess one. Also just obviously I don't want to break the flow, but there's an amazing app which I've got on my laptop called Iris. And it just softens everything. It takes out the blue light a little bit, stops the flicker. We'll get into flicker later. But it does also remind you to look up at a distance of 30 yards or something, 30 meters for 30 seconds. And when you do that, you work and you look into a distance when it tells you to. And it does, you suddenly notice how much your eyes are straining. So yeah, sometimes we need the little tools to help us out like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mentioned earlier that most of the time, and 500 lux already feels pretty bright. Most homes are around 200 to 300. So it's you can see how even on a sort of cloudy day, you're getting get yourself outside, get them outside, even in their wellies, so that they get the kind of the plant in a cupboard reflex gets dampened down a little bit, so that they retain good vision, because a lot of particularly little children, they don't know how to not being able to see very well becomes normal, and so they don't complain, and so they spend a lot of their lives. My niece particularly has very bad eyesight, and she just feels absolutely dreadful. It took her years before we realized what the issue was, and she spent years being at the back of the classroom just thinking she wasn't very bright, and actually she just couldn't see very well. So and the other issue is that as your eyes stretch forward into that sort of squashed balloon shape, that retinal tissue at the back starts to stretch, and it's more likely to break. There's about I think it's a 10% increase in chance of actually losing your sight altogether later on, which is, and you struggle to do sport, even though you're doing an Ironman with your glasses on, Xander. You just don't want to be dealing with, kids don't want to be dealing with glasses, and so making sure they get enough light means that they can see properly, they can participate fully in sports and other things they might want to do, and actually means they've got other careers open to them, like being an astronaut or whatever. So let's move on to the next one. So this is the standard recommendation. So you can see in an art room where you want to be doing close work, the recommendation is even higher than that. And that will already feel quite bright. But there are some lamps out there which will allow you to create that level of brightness in your in your study or in your child's study space. So it needs to feel sort of quite bright, particularly in order to get anywhere close to the kinds of light levels that you're getting outside. So thinking about creating, particularly as we're working from home, making sure that your kids have got a study space that's got enough bright light in it and of that blue, cool wake up light to keep them alert while they're trying to get some work done. Okay,
and the dark light as well, as you touched on in previous webinars, going outside and making sure you do get that.
The other thing is that not all light is created equal. We know that our eyes struggle with bright light, particularly at a particular angle, which is coming right into our eyes. And as we get older, as our eyes get cloudier, actually we only get, a 45-year-old only gets about half as much light as a 10-year-old in their eyes. So you need to just be aware of that, but also thinking about the optics of the lamps that you choose. And I know that Phos, among many others, make lamps with optics, which mean that even if you get quite a bright light, you haven't got the glare. So you need to just think about, if you're thinking about their workspace or where you're where they're hanging out, to make sure that you're not getting light. It's called discomfort glare or disability glare, as you'll be aware if headlamps travel towards you from a car at night, you suddenly find it really hard to see, and your eyes are essentially blinded because the window of your eye is open too wide. In fact, I think I've got a slide for that. Do you want to just move on to the next one?
Yeah.
There we are. So the eye was designed to deal with the natural environment. So when it's dark, the pupil sort of opens like a window to let in more light, and when it's bright light, that little window at the front closes. And as I said, little kids' eyes are sort of twice as clear as our eyes. So if they're getting too much light, then if they're in a situation of glare, their pupils won't know what to do. They will be in this kind of crazy opening and closing reflex, and too much of the wrong kind of light will get in and start to damage their retinas. And in fact, when you're dealing with something like a dark screen in a bright room, a bright screen in a dark room, your eyes are kind of trying to work out whether it should be, they're trying to kind of take in the whole scene, so they're open, and so the blue light coming from the screen is even more likely to get in through that retinal into the retina and start to damage the eyes. So one of the other things to think about when you're creating a study space, particularly as the evenings draw in, is to make sure that you've got that they've got extra lamps around so that the screen itself isn't too bright. And a general rule is about 50%. So if it glows, it's burning essentially. So you need to create a balance between the ambient light and the
of what? Sorry.
So
50% of what? Sorry.
So if the light around your screen should be about half as bright as the screen itself. Okay. The lights in the room are never going to be as bright as a glowing screen, obviously, but to create a level of balance so that your pupil can open to let in, to kind of accommodate the whole scene, as opposed to being trying to accommodate a dark scene and having the door open essentially to the wavelength. So the standard is about 50%.
Okay, that's interesting.
The other thing, obviously the eye is going to struggle with reflection. So one of the other things you can do is to make sure that your screen, the ideal is about 90 degrees to the window. You can see there that the window is right behind this person. If you can have your screen sideways to the window, or as I've got my windows in front of me, but it's a long way away, so I haven't got too much discomfort. I haven't got too much contrast or discomfort glare. So if you've got a window in your room, which is obviously an absolute delight, and you want to be quite close to it, but make sure that it's not neither behind you nor in front of you, because you'll have lots of bright light coming around the edges of your screen, which your eye is going to struggle to accommodate for. And if you turn it around so it's at the back of you, you're going to have lots of light bouncing from it, and your eye's trying to work out, kind of peer past the reflective surface, which is obviously a strain and can even become quite painful.
I think the number of Zoom calls we've all had one moment where the window is just behind us.
Yeah. So the other thing to think about is how eyes work, and how you can be kind of aware of another parameter, which is kind of a bit controversial at the moment. It's a parameter called flicker, where all lights, essentially, other than the sun, actually that's flickering, but it's such a long way away, it's been evened out by now. All LED lights, particularly, there's there are pulses of electrons coming through which are lighting the chip. And in an incandescent bulb, there was a pulse of light coming through, and the wire was just glowing, and it wasn't a problem. But as your eyes are looking at this scene, what's happening is that your eyes are moving across in jumps. They're called saccades, and you do about 3 of those per second normally. And you're able to kind of cover the whole of the scene in these very large jumps, and your brain stitches together those different jumps to create sort of the illusion of a continuous image on your retina. And so I put that picture there because your eyes are basically trying to sort of join the dots. And this is controversial, but one way you can see whether your LED light is flickering is by again, it's not accurate, and there is controversy about this, but if you use your phone on a low resolution setting, you'll probably see banding, and that's a sign of flicker traveling across, coming through the LED. And for many people, that's not an issue, but for people with sensory processing issues or with epilepsy or other sorts of sensitivities, then any kind of flicker can be a real problem. That causes migraines, it causes fatigue, because the retina is actually picking up on that very slight modulation. And as the eye is flickering across, sort of traveling across a scene or trying to work out how to read, if you can imagine, 1 minute it's bright and the next minute it's dark, and you end up with sort of an interlacing between the space of your flicker and the space of the space of the eyes and the space of the flicker, it will end up being very confusing. And in fact, you end up, people are less accurate in the way they read, and they read more slowly because it's kind of hard to know what's going on. It's confusing to the visual system. So particularly if you're trying to learn to read or learning a foreign language or something, having a steady light source is going to make a big difference to your ability to read and your confidence in reading. So this is just a diagram to show that. I don't want to get too technical about it, but essentially, as you can see, an incandescent bulb, because the wire is basically glowing, there's not an issue. The difference between them is not that great. Fluorescent, again, because there's a latency there, it's the dip isn't so great. But with an LED, very often there isn't a latency. So when the power goes off, the thing gets dark. And because an LED is a system between the chip itself and then the wires and then the driver, which is chopping up the power from an alternating current to a direct current, and then your original light source or the switch, you've got a number of different places where flicker can be introduced. So it's not a straightforward thing, but you do need to be aware that, particularly when these lights are dimmed, if it's not a good quality lamp and it's not being properly wired or controlled, then you get some pretty disruptive flicker, which can be really painful and tiring for a lot of people. And actually, I'm just going to mention there that now, including a number of manufacturers are promoting this idea of flicker-free lamps. So it's something to just consider and just be aware of. And as I say, it's controversial as to whether it is a useful way of kind of actually recording or understanding the flicker in your lamps, or whether it's actually going to do any harm. But it is quite an interesting exercise just to point your video camera at an LED light source and just see what you can see. The final thing is, I think this is the last one, is just if you're learning, and certainly young kids are learning about the world, and you're learning about food, or I'm an artist, so the ability to render colors is really important. And another area to think about in your workspace, particularly your child's workspace, if you think about food or about art or about science or lots and lots of different subjects which really rely on being able to see colors clearly. The colors that you perceive are a combination of, basically the colors that are coming out of the light source and the colors that are being absorbed by the object, and then the colors and the rest of it's coming back to your eye. So if you look at these strawberries, the light, your ability to see the color is, they're actually absorbing everything except the red, and it's the red that's coming back to you. So you could say that anything but red is kind of an interesting paradox. But the light, the lamp above has got a color rendering index, which means that it's only throwing out 75% of the full 100 is sunlight with all the colors in the rainbow. CRI is only 75% of the rainbow. CRI color rendering index 95, and I understand that Xander was very proud to say that a project that you're working on is getting a very high color rendering index now. Allows you to see those strawberries in all their full glory, and very often we don't know the difference until we see one next to another. So be aware of it's going to be more expensive to create a lamp that's got a higher color rendering index, just because it involves a whole load of technology in the chip. But a more expensive lamp is likely to have a higher color rendering index, which means that you and your children see the world in color properly, as opposed to a sort of a poor rendition of that you get in.
I think one of the, so obviously it's a really hot topic at the moment. I think that from my perspective, obviously I'm going out and speaking to designers, and our range of lights are sort of made in the UK to a high standard, heritage of materials, all that kind of stuff. And it's difficult to explain to people that, like, the difference between a £5 LED and a more expensive, sort of more premium one is so vast. And the difference is astonishing. And with the increase in price, you hope there's sort of a relative line as to the increase in quality as well. And as I was sort of saying to you beforehand, I mean, all major chip manufacturers now are offering extremely high CRI stuff. It's I think in about a year and a half's time, it'll be ubiquitous in the industry. And we're very close to releasing something that's that's exactly that. I think it should be the norm, and it will be the norm very, very soon, but only if you go for sort of reputable manufacturers. And I think that all the discussions we've had with yourself and with other people that have joined the webinar, and even out and about speaking to lighting designers who obviously have sort of like a massive depth of knowledge on it as well, quality lighting, when introduced to a space correctly with high quality color rendering, which is becoming more and more ubiquitous, as I say, can make such a massive difference to the project. And the amount of times I find myself on site explaining to very high net worth individuals that if they go 20% more on the cost of a light, they'll get an infinitely higher quality of material sort of reveal, if you know what I mean. So every single item and piece of furnishing and everything in the space will look infinitely better just for that little upgrade. It's often such a difficult battle to fight, but it really, really is. It's true, and it's difficult sometimes getting people to see the light, for one of a better expression.
Yeah. So I mean, there's an example. You can see the different wavelengths of light, and again, when in different light sources. So we're coming back sort of full circle. I'm just going to, Simone, I will come back to your point actually, because it's a really, really good one about why about flicker. But essentially, you can see. I've been interested to whenever you buy a lamp, it's really interesting to go to see if they will give you a specification sheet, because the ideal is that you have no for late at night. Essentially, you should not have that. It's called the melanopic peak, that blue peak around. You can see in the cool white LED. That is your that's the bit of your visual system that's not forming images but telling the time. That is looking for a peak in that sort of mid 400s range to say, it's daytime. So when you want to have a lamp that tells you it's time to go to bed, your after dusk light, you should be looking for lamps which don't have that peak. And I was looking on the specification sheet for actually a pretty reputable firm, which I won't mention, but there was even though it was called a warm white, there was still a massive blue peak. So be quite demanding about that, particularly in spaces where your kids are trying to learn and sleep. That's going to make a huge difference. But again, Xander is saying the same thing that I'm saying. So when you buy something that's higher spec, well, actually, like anything else really, and I have a feeling that like no one would imagine, except for the builders that I often work with, they'd rather have instant coffee than anything else, because it's a slightly safer bet. But nowadays most people wouldn't go for an instant coffee over a ground coffee. And I think our expectation of lighting in terms of the quality of the color, the quality of the optics, and the quality of the flicker is going to well, with all of us together, is going to be transformed. I think people have been very sort of undemanding. Actually, we've pretty much taken what we've given and been on the sort of cost conversation rather than the kind of experience conversation. But you must be at the sharp end of that more than I am, Sander.
Yeah. But I think it's, it's a difficult conversation to have with people, and obviously, everyone has a limit as to how much they're willing to spend on certain things. But it is something that does have such a huge impact on the entire space and your quality of life within it. So, it's a very small upgrade that you can make with such a big difference.
So, I mean, I guess particularly for kids, where they're trying to learn, they're trying to see what the world around them is like, in the same way that you wouldn't kind of smoke around them, you wouldn't offer them a glass of, you wouldn't have, you wouldn't smoke around them. Don't take as much care as you with the lights as well, because it's part of, they're breathing it, they're enjoying it. Just I'm just going to respond to 2 points in the chat briefly. So, Simone, yes, you're going to notice it indirectly more because the peripheral vision, that low level, called the is it scotopic vision, is the it's actually more sensitive to temporal change, so it's going to notice flicker more than the central color vision. So that's I think that's it. One way or the other, I know that it does. People like Arnold Wilkins, who's done all the work on this amazing topic. He's very clear that that flicker in the peripheral vision is definitely an issue, but also dimmed lights. Again, a flicker in a high intensity light is more visible. It has more impact. Obviously, the on-off is much stronger. The reason to mention that dimmed lights are very often LED dimmed lights are have more flicker is that one of the ways, the simplest and cheapest way that LED lights can dim, there are other ways now electronically, but the cheapest and simplest way is for them to simply send out fewer flashes of light, which means that obviously the gaps between those flashes is bigger, so it creates a more noticeable flicker. So if the lights are dim, but they aren't dimmed, they're not dimmed using a poor quality dimming system, then yes, there will be less impact from that. Does that answer your question, Simone? And
sorry, I had my dad on last week. I got my mum on this week. She's actually had a detached retina before, and she's had sort of cataracts and stuff. So so she sees a lot of glare.
Yeah, well, that'll be why. I mean, essentially, what's happening is it's like kind of looking through a windscreen that isn't clean, essentially. I mean, sorry, Amanda, I don't want to sort of suggest remote that your eyes aren't clean, but if you imagine sort of looking through a surface that isn't completely clear. I mean, kids' eyes are born, they are super clear. As we get older, they get less clear. And I mean, detached retina, one of the reasons can be that you've got the shape of your eye is unusual, so that that sensitive membrane isn't spread around. I think Zana mentioned that you had astigmatism, so your eyes are an unusual shape, which means that the way that membrane is positioned on the back of your eye isn't it's sort of not sitting comfortably. And the other is, as if you've had cataracts, that means there's sort of a build-up of other material in your, they're often collagens, they're fats and other materials which are building up in the front of your eye, which then make it so cloudy that it's hard to see out. And even when that gets removed, sometimes when you put in, either a cataract can redevelop, or there's stuff, they're called floaters, that can still be in there, but also you can have sometimes the material that you put in isn't completely, and so there's all sorts of reasons, but essentially the window of your eye isn't completely transparent, which means
a floater, little, the sort of squiggly lines you get running across the floater. Yeah,
that's called a floater.
What is that then? It's fluid, or it's
No, it's collagen. They're little pieces of fatty tissue which are essentially floating around in the aqueous humor and in the vitreous humor. So in the different sorts of liquid in your eye, you imagine that there isn't. It's amazingly good at keeping itself clean, but every so often, bits break off and float around and sort of go between the retina, the light sensing piece at the back, and the lens. So it's you sort of see it in the fishbowl of your eye, essentially. That's what's going on.
Okay.
Nothing dangerous, but it's But yeah, it's a sign. But it's what happens as we get older, actually.
Yeah. Great, but I mean, we've. I know you've got to jump off at something else a little well, shortly
No,
after
it's
this.
fine.
That's why we've kind of jumped through. But I think I'll let you sort of read off the conclusions, and then maybe we
Yeah.
can open up a bit of a discussion and
Yeah.
take it away. What would you say the sort of the main conclusions of these slides?
So essentially, the main thing that is so vital to learning everything, I mean, both your physical memory, your motor memory, your declarative memory, your mood, all of that stuff is the body clock. So making sure that you get a good night's sleep, so that's bright days and properly dark nights, and switching off everything at least an hour before bed, and that includes sort of LEDs that are kind of flickering and buzzing around in your room, because even a tiny glimmer of light can be an issue, particularly for kids. So find a way to, if they're scared of the dark, or there are more and more recommendations that you put a very, very warm, very low, sort of almost red colored night light, those little ones that plug into the wall, so that you can get out to just go to the loo. Don't use your phone after you've said you're switching off. Apparently 20% of adults actually, after they've gone to bed and switched everything off, continue to check their phone. So see if you can possibly wean yourself off that, because you and your kids will thank you for it.
Sleep hygiene, isn't it? It's called in terms of.
It is. And actually making sure, I mean, we have so many bright lights out in the streets these days, making sure that you can have proper blackout curtains makes a big difference. And a number of people actually suggest, if you do struggle to fall asleep, or if you're in a house or in a space where there is other light on, then adding a blackout face mask is a really good idea.
It's difficult though, isn't it? Because I mean, in terms of sort of waking up, I've got one of these Lumi alarm clocks that sort of wakes you up with light gradually. And I've also got a light from the street shining straight through my window. So on one hand, I need to wear an eye mask. On the other hand, I need the light to wake me up. So if I don't wear the eye mask, then I'm like, well, I'll wake up with my phone. And then you get a piercing, shrieking kind of Apple ringtone waking me up at whatever time. And then that suddenly puts me into stress. So
I mean, the eye mask is, I mean, unless it's kind of wraps your complete head, you're going to be seeing stuff under the edges of your eye mask.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the best solution actually would be to see if you can get some proper curtains on your window, particularly as you go into winter. It's going to be good for your for the insulation of your room as well. So I think even a blanket pinned up there for now would be a good move. So.
Well, it's interesting as well, so I'm part of the renter generation. I mean, it's, with house prices and stuff, it's very difficult to own a house. So, investing in sort of blackout curtains for 12 months of time spending at a flat is difficult. I think there's a whole other debate about sort of responsibility of developers and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely important.
But I mean, I've lived in enough rental places myself, and actually, you can always put a couple of cup hooks in the corner and put up, a towel or something at night. I agree, it's not particularly sort of
elegant.
Well, it's not particularly sort of beautiful, but actually there are a few landlords that would object to that, and you'll have a curtain or a blanket or something that you can use to darken it. I think I mean, take your point. And that's the great thing actually about lighting, is that you can transform a space by changing the light bulbs. So, and you can sort of buy posh light bulbs and take them with you. So that's a great investment in your environment as a renter. In fact, you sort of feel a bit downstream of a landlord's decisions, but that's one decision you can make, is to just change the light bulbs, and it makes a massive difference. So the next thing is during the day, make sure you get enough sunlight. And if you can't get your 2 hours outside, particularly if you can use the time that you would have been walking to school or whatever to get outside, that would be brilliant. And be aware that, in fact, someone like Stephen Lockley talks about using bright blue sort of cool lights in your overhead fittings, and then dimmer warm lights to wind down in your lower level lighting, in order to deliver enough light to the spaces where you're working. Sort of 750 lux, for example, that's pretty bright. What you need to be doing is and because light falls off the further away you are from the light fitting, there's an inverse. I won't go into that, it's boring, but essentially having a task light with a good old bright light. There's some great ones at Hobbycraft, for example. They're a little bit flickery, but they're nice and bright, and they're quite low level, and they're not too glary. So you can bring the light to where you need it, as opposed to having the whole room full of it, and all the kind of glare that you get from onto the screen. To manage the contrast, that 50-50, just see if you can, if you're in a room which is getting dark, see if you can turn on some side lights so that you can create, so that you can help your eye to be at the, help their eyes to be at the right apertures, basically. If it's a tiny glowing screen in a dark scene, then their eyes are going to be opening too much, and they're going to be getting this high energy frequencies into the wrong place. Look at glare. Wherever they're sitting and working, just kind of stand behind them and just see what they can see. Make sure that the angle of the light and the optics of the light, particularly, a more expensive light is going to have better optics anyway, but see if you can do that. Contrast, flicker, and check the color rendering, because it's a subtle difference, but it's a massive difference. And once you've seen the difference, a bit like proper coffee or an expensive chocolate, you never really want, or too much of wine, you really never want to go back. So that's my summary.
Well, I think. Thanks, Shelley. It's such a thorough and efficient sort of run through of all things flicker and light quality and everything. It is. I know that Simone mentioned Matthew Walker's book on sleep, and that's an amazing read. There's also delved a little bit into this and the importance of light in terms of setting circadian rhythms and sleep, and what different levels of sleep can do to memory as well. And that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I think the way that LED technology has moved from its infancy to where it is now, I think people are demanding a lot more from the quality of their lives. I think, especially with lockdown, we're indoors a lot more, and we're aware of the quality of the light sources. And I think that chip manufacturers have caught onto this, and we've got really, really, really good color rendering chips available on the market for everyone to purchase and put in their products. And that is just it's gonna be a thing very soon, and it is for us very soon as well. So, I think we should all be fighting the good fight for the power of light and getting our diet of light as well, as you say. And yeah, I think there's a lot to think about here. And I don't know if anyone else has any questions from the sort of chat. I know often it's quite difficult just to immediately think of a load when someone says that. But so Light Tribe at phos.co.uk. I'll pin it now. So that one just at the top. If you have any questions at all, drop us a line, and then we will send out a mailer after this to all of you guys that attended, and that'll have a link to all of these as well, which is the website, Age of Light Innovations, which is Dr. Shelley's awesome site. Light Tribe website, which has a reading list that has all of our videos. This one will be recorded, or is being recorded, and will be put on that as well. So we've got a reference of all the webinars that we've done. We've got a YouTube, Instagram, all of this other stuff. So we'll send a mailer out. And as ever, thank you so much for sort of stopping by and listening to the wisdom of the people that we bring on. And lovely to have you back, Shelley. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And
absolute pleasure. Yeah, please do fire off any questions. As you can tell, I'm passionate about this. I'm in the process of setting up some sort of education videos, little Instagram type posts. So I'll be sharing those as well soon, because I really think that it's time we gave them a better chance, and lighting such a simple thing we can do, all of us, in our own way. So thanks for your company.
No, pleasure. Well, look, guys, enjoy the rest of the week, and go and get some your diet of light and stuff, and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week.
All right, bye.
Bye.